perpetual.
We've got a couple of philosophical questions left.
Please.
So the sanctions have been applied to put pressure on every sector of our economy. It feels as if now, in contrast to the situation when the Soviet Union put up the Iron Curtain to shut itself off from the West of its own will, Russia is being forced to put that curtain up and become some sort of a new North Korea. It's like people don't want it, no one wants it, but the big powerful machine is already working and someone is pushing the buttons. I'm saying it's like North Korea because North Korea was buried under the sanctions, or it's like Cuba where people still drive cars made in the 1960s. So maybe someone wants Russians to start going through scrap metal and repairing old Zaporozhets cars to drive them.
What a shame that I sold mine. I used to own a Zhiguli car from the 1980s. I guess I could use it now.
That was probably the idea. So what do you think, as a worst-case scenario, could this kind of thing happen in Russia?
I think everyone understands that it can't, even though in the course of this interview I did question the intellectual abilities of the people who come up with all these sanctions against Russia. I must say there are different people there, and some realize very well what's going on. You see, all of them understand that, with all due and utmost respect to our friends in Cuba and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Russia is no Cuba and no North Korea. Russia is Russia, the world's largest country, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, a huge economy and a nuclear power, which is why all these ideas that Russia can't be curbed like Cuba or North Korea once were, and that it could just be kept that way, don't have a leg to stand on. It's impossible. It's just utterly impossible, even if some in the political circles and elites of the West would want it that way. Yes, there are obviously challenges and we'll have to overcome them. Unfortunately, they exist both at the government and everyday level. Still, it's nothing new for us and it's not catastrophic. It pales in comparison to the hardships that our country had to go through in the 20th century. I tell you what, it's not even in the same league with the problems we faced during the coronavirus pandemic. Back then, we really felt uneasy from time to time because we had no idea how this virus would behave, regardless of where it came from. Could it kill off most of humanity, like in some sci-fi books? Back then, things were much more tense, I'd say. The tragedy, of course, is that the virus caused so many deaths. But this is a different story, and there can be no illusions here. They're trying to put us into the rogue nation or rogue country category. As for its etymology, I think it was Reagan who came up with that term. The Russian translation for it is outcast, but rogue is actually closer in meaning to outlaw. In fact, it's the US that's the rogue nation here. It's not because we don't like Americans, it's because the US is constantly launching wars of conquest across the world. They are the outcast and the outlaw.
The US has taken similar actions on multiple occasions in the past and in the regions that are in no way part of their immediate interests. These countries are not their neighbors or a threat to the US. Take Yugoslavia, Iraq, Afghanistan, but the US's military action has never resulted in such a massive and consolidated response from the West. No one responded to a bombed wedding party in Afghanistan by shutting down European clothes shops in the US. There were no other repercussions either. Why? Why are we witnessing such a powerful response to Russia's moves that you say are fully justified in terms of our security?
Now, this is not going to sound as an insight, but clearly the US believes it is a nation outside international law above everything else. Following the collapse of the USSR and an end to the bipolar world order based on the standoff between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, the US saw itself as the winner and the sole beneficiary of the Soviet Union's demise. While in reality the Soviet Union broke up not because of NATO's activities, but for internal reasons. And that's why they behave accordingly. They believe they cannot be brought to justice, but they have the right to judge everyone. They are the ultimate decision makers. They have the right to do whatever they want. There are a number of drivers behind this behaviour. First of all, economically, the US is a very strong country. Secondly, it issues the main reserve currency with vengeance, continuing to pile up its domestic debt. In fact, it is the whole world that is the US's creditor. The entire world could be struggling, plunged into crisis, while the Americans are printing dollars. That is why they now feel completely unpunished in this respect as well. Exactly for that reason, the US's actions in Afghanistan, Iraq and Vietnam a few decades ago have never come under any legal scrutiny by the international community. However, at the time of the Vietnam War, the Soviet Union was still alive, pushing for quite heavy debates as multilateral platforms. The Soviet Union, as you know, was helping Vietnam back then. The US pursued its policy for a long time. We all remember the way it ended. Mind you, Vietnam is thousands of kilometers away from the US. Now, it's a fact few people remember, even in this country, because it was a long time ago. But my Vietnamese friend said the US intervention in Vietnam throughout much of the 1960s killed over 1 million Vietnamese. Just think about it, over 1 million. Take a look at the map and see for yourself where the US is and where Vietnam is. Still, the US went in and over 1 million people died as a result. Even then, it was never widely condemned, although we had the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union in place. And after the Soviet Union disappeared from the world map, along with the Warsaw Pact, the US got absolutely out of control. They think they can do whatever they want. Yugoslavia is a case in point. We saw utter disregard for international law, the use of the armed forces and weapons by a number of countries, including depleted uranium ammunition. Was there any uproar? No. They realized they could go ahead, concocted a justification and got away with it. Today, some European leaders admit, well, yes, maybe they overreacted a little, but it does not go beyond that. Again, the US behaves this way around the world because they think there is no longer any competition, but they're wrong. Life does not stand still, prompting new developments in international relations and new countries emerging as strong powerhouses. It means new centers of gravity in international relations are being shaped. Take the People's Republic of China, India and the Russian Federation. The unipolar world is over. The US is no longer the master of planet Earth.
You must be aware that some Russians packed their